Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined today by Eric Franchi, and we have two guests today. We have Mathieu Roche, the CEO of ID5, and James Avery, the CEO of Kevel. And what we're doing this week is a special episode. We're calling it the fundraising episode. We've been asked quite a bit for what's going on in the world of ad tech fundraising, what it is to try to raise money in this environment. So we have two CEOs who are in the middle of the process who are going to help hopefully give us some insight. So Mathieu and James, thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, guys. And one VC and disclosure, my fund is an investor in both companies. Actually, all companies represented here, including Marketecture.
Wow, that's pretty good. This better be a good episode to get your ROI up there. Or
I've been excited all week, and I'm at the beach.
Who would you say you're not invested in, Eric?
Yeah, exactly. I'm an investor in ID5 as well. So we got all these conflicts of interest going around, but there are no conflict, no interest, as they say. So quick promo. So on Marketecture TV, we had a really interesting episode this week that dropped with Nexon, formerly known as Tremor, formerly known as Amobi, formerly known as Rhythm One, formerly known as take your pick. They're an interesting company with a lot of things going on. So I think it's worth a watch on Marketecture TV. All right, let's dive into it. So conventional wisdom is that it's impossible to raise money as an ad tech company and that it's impossible to raise money as any kind of venture-funded company unless you're AI or superconductivity or something like that. Tell me why I'm wrong. Maybe start with Mathieu.
Well, I think there's a lot of money out there. I wouldn't say it's easy, certainly. And it hasn't been easy for the past 12 months. I think the market, I don't have stats. I'll look at the specialists for that. But the market was pretty dry for the past 12 months, I think. And it's always been difficult, I think, for ad tech just because it's complicated. And investors don't like what's complicated, right? They like clear, like black, white, right, wrong type of things. And ad tech is all sorts of grays. And that makes it for a difficult read. So I've never had an easy fundraise experience, right? I don't know how it is for you, James, but like for me, it's always been a battle. So it's no different this year. Certainly not easier, but there's money out there, and there are smart investors who get what we're doing and are ready to invest. So I guess you just need to be ready to look for them a bit more.
Yeah, James.
Yeah, I would say, I think raising money is hard no matter what, but I do think it is harder in ad tech, especially because I think you have a lot of investors who made kind of one or two bets back 10 years ago and they went wrong and they were like, oh, this company was doing 20 million in EBITDA and then went to zero because, it turns out they were, side loading video streaming ads onto websites that didn't know they were there and things like that. So like there's a lot of that kind of bad blood, it feels like, in venture capitalists out there. And so there's a lot of firms that just don't do ad tech. And then for us,
do you think there's more bad blood in ad tech than in other industries? Because companies have been losing billions of dollars in all sorts of industries, right? And so
I think I would
ad tech in particular.
I'd rather be raising an ad tech than like 15-minute food delivery right now. Right? So there's plenty of tough like industries out there. But I think like compared to like SaaS, right? Like it's like I think if you're building like a SaaS tool for sales and marketers, right? Like that, I don't think there's like bad blood out there in that space.
I would bifurcate the venture market because I spent a lot of time trying to educate, aforementioned firms that made a bad investment in 2010 and soured on the category, including 2023 after there's been like multiple like home run grand slam wins across the board. I think you have the old guard, which, I think for better, for worse, probably for better, is frankly beginning to age out and transitioning the sort of leadership at their firms. And there's less bias, but that bias is still there for some of those like larger Silicon Valley based firms that again made a bad investment in an ad network in 2011. But then on the other side, there's been an explosion in all types of VC firms. And, educating those folks and getting them to understand this category has been a good spend of time. And I find that they're more apt to lean in. And then you've got the folks that know the space, have worked in the space, have capital vehicles to invest in the space. And, they're like us, heads down and doing this stuff. But, this generalist VC who has a large fund, who, has a brand name, those are typically really challenging to get involved. But then again, how much value can they add besides capital? So if you can get capital, do you really need them?
Well, at some point you need capital though. So I think there's a stage difference here, which is early stage, which you specialize in, Eric, is fairly robust, right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you start going for A or B round, you have to go to the big firms.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's the challenge here. And I think that's why it's interesting to have Mathieu and James, because they're not startup pre-seed stage companies. James has been doing this for 12 years.
Yeah, we'll call it 12 years, more like 13, 14, but
Yeah.
So what's it like? So James, like what's a pitch like in you go into, Sand Hill Road, some godfather of the West Coast scene, and they just laugh you out of the office. Ad tech. Well, I lost all my money in that.
We've always been in a weird situation, because while we're in the ad tech space, we are a SaaS company, right? Like, we've never sold an ad. We don't take a percentage of media. And so, I think a lot of investors, like, to get in the room, you have to convince them you're not ad tech. And then they're kind of interested, but then they get a little bit confused. Or the flip side too is, I'll say there's kind of like these investors that have been around ad tech a long time, Eric excluded here, but like, I've been around ad tech a long time. And if it doesn't look like a traditional ad tech, they're a lot less interested. And so sometimes, like, we would fall through the cracks of, like, we're too ad tech for the SaaS investors and we're too SaaS for the ad tech investors.
Right.
And it takes the right investor to kind of see, like, okay, there is a great opportunity here.
How much do you get into this conversation of recurring versus non-recurring revenue? Because this was I have my own battle scars from this at Beeswax.
Yeah, I mean, like, to us, like, recurring revenue is revenue that people are actually committing to you, right? But like, that has changed, right? Like, every industry talks about, Trade Desk is like, we have this is like ARR, and I'm like, but you could stop spending tomorrow if they all agreed to, right? Like, it would just go to zero, other than like commitments and the pre-spend and things like that.
So is your model, I'm not, when you price, are you a hybrid, like a minimum commitment and then overages and things like that?
Yeah, we call it usage now. Overage has more of a negative connotation.
Sure, usage. So how do the VCs think about usage revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I think they look at usage, maybe slightly discounted to the committed amount. But at this day and age, like, most of the time they're valuing it roughly the same.
Interesting.
One of the firms out there has done a lot of work on this. They actually try to make the point that usage revenue is in some ways more valuable, because you could have a customer. We've all had customers that pay you $10K a month and don't use your platform.
Right.
Versus somebody who's paying you $10K a month and doing 10, 20K in usage. You actually know that customer is, like, getting value from you.
Yeah. So also a little quick story. When we were raising the Beeswax B round, I guess it was 2019-ish, 18, 19. We're SaaS. That was what got people excited about Beeswax, but also we had usage revenue. And our usage revenue started skyrocketing during our fund process. Like, we had to update our slides every month because we couldn't believe how hockey sticking we were going. And I was excited about this. And it was reacted very negatively by VCs we were talking about. I had one VC literally look at my chart that had like a bar graph of recurring plus usage up and to the right. And he said, I don't consider that usage revenue at all. Like, I'm just going to mark that to zero, and we'll do your multiple based on the blue bar, not the yellow bar, which I thought was one of the dumbest things I'd ever heard a business professional. And this is a real well-known West Coast person.
Yeah, no, that's like that is definitely the old school thought there, right? I think it was the firm I was talking about earlier was OpenView, who does they write a lot of stuff around like usage. And it's like, usage should be, I mean, I can understand discounting it a little bit because sure, it's not contractually committed, but all those contractually committed customers can churn too, right? Like, it's not like it's, any more guaranteed really.
You once said, it might have actually been in like a Slack channel. I don't think if it was a tweet, that for ad tech companies, net revenue retention is the metric to point to, particularly if you're not a SaaS business. Do you still feel that way?
I think it's very important. And this is something that Luma helped me with a little bit. So we use Luma in our transaction, and we were presenting our churn or revenue retention based only on the committed. And so it didn't always look good because we'd lose a customer here and there at Beeswax. And also some of our customers would go out of business. That was a pretty common problem for Beeswax. And the Luma people said, let's do cohorts based on net revenue retention, including the variable. Right. And suddenly we had significantly negative net revenue retention, which is good, like or negative churn. So it was basically, if you looked at cohorts of beeswax customers, they would in terms of total revenue to beeswax, they would grow every month, even though every once in a while we would lose a logo. And so I think that was very instructive, as long as you're honest about it and you're talking about, customers who do sometimes churn being excluded from that number.
Yeah, I agree. We do the same. We're looking at cohorts and net revenue retention per cohorts, so that you kind of amortize the effect of the smaller, or sometimes you got misqualification of your portfolio of your targets, right? So you're going to sign a contract for like 6 months, that doesn't work out, contract churns, but it's a small number, and you've got 3 other contracts you sign at the same time, but they're going to double or triple over a couple of years. And so you can offset that if you look at just like pure churn in numbers of clients, it's not really representative. If you build NRR and you look at NRR over actual revenue, total revenue, whether it's recurring or usage based, it gives a much better picture, because there's a lot of the value of ad tech is in the volume, and the volume builds up over time.
Right. And
so if you look at your client, I think one of our oldest clients has gone up 500% in value over 4 years. And that's really what you want to see as your client grow, because they're using more of your services, right? So that's I think that's the right metric. The NRR metric is really strong.
One piece of advice I give to entrepreneurs is, especially younger ones, is that churn is not a gap metric. And what I mean by that is there is no single reliable definition of what is churn, and you should think about how it matches your actual business, because public companies out there, SaaS public companies, all have different definitions of churn, all meant to make their numbers just look better. Mathieu, I want to talk to you about policy, privacy, and stuff like that, how that affects your fundraise. Like if you go in there, I'd imagine there are probably people who are just scared off by the whole concept of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the distinction I was making earlier between the ones who understand and the ones who don't, right? The ones who don't, they're very difficult to, they might understand SaaS, they might understand the metric, but if they don't understand the space you operate in, they don't understand the dynamic, they're really very, very quickly scared by the macro kind of impact of regulation and, Google, Meta, Apple kind of overweight presence in the space, because it's complicated, right? And so it just creates this kind of weird dynamic where I don't see the path, I don't see the way, because I don't understand the intricacies. I mean, it's an $800 billion market that we're addressing, right? Like there's a lot of leftovers, there's a lot of crumbs that you can build big businesses out of. But from 30,000 feet, I guess from Sand Hill Road, it doesn't look big enough. They're all going after the $1 billion company, and so
right.
It's difficult, and regulation. I mean, it's a huge opportunity for the space to reinvent itself, for company to come with innovative ideas, right? That's what led to the creation of ID5. And I think there's a bunch of companies out there, even verticals, right? If you think of data clean room, the whole identity space, all of that is going to be creating massive value over time. And it spawns out of regulatory changes and kind of technical changes. So it's actually an opportunity, but if you're not kind of aware of how the space is organized, what people actually use technology for, how it works, it's scary. And so that's where the difference is between the one who understand, or are willing to understand and can invest into the space, and the ones who are like, I'm not, it's too complicated for me.
On the other side, you have Kevel, which is riding the wave of everything is an ad network, ad tech is eating the world, commerce media, whatever you want to call it. Do you find that, especially over the course of the past year or so, James, investors are, generally more interested in, where the sort of growth in the market is going and how you guys are squarely situated?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think commerce and kind of retail media being so kind of hot right now have definitely helped us with both inbounds and conversations with companies. I'd say one of the tried and true ways to get interest from an investor is to have one of their portfolio companies use you, right? I think I've gotten the best leads of all time have always come from, hey, this portfolio company that, the investor sits on the board. They see that company selected Kevel to build their, retail media platform. And then they're like, who's this Kevel company? I should talk to them. And so I think that's if you really want to be sophisticated about targeting certain VCs, go target their portfolio and make sure you know which ones they're on the board of, because other companies they might know about, but they don't really care, right? It's like, who are they on the board of? Go try to sell those companies and you'll get into that VC in the best way possible.
And Mathieu, the decline of the cookie or the cookie going away, does that provide similar tailwinds for you, or is it because it's, in this world of privacy and compliance, it just got too much hair on it?
it made the problem we're solving a lot more visible for the investors, for the investor community, right? Because they also like that Meta kind of got hit massively in terms of stock value, right? Stock price. And they were like, oh, what's the problem? Oh, IDFA. Okay, so identity is something that creates massive value because Meta has lost like hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in value, right? So they were able to associate what we do with what happened to Meta when IDFA started to be removed and cookies for retargeting with Criteo and all those things. So I think it helps make the problem more visible and more kind of understandable for them. So it's definitely been helpful, if you wish, in terms of trend. Yeah.
One of the things that venture investors really are looking for is what's sometimes called venture scale returns. So in the venture business, you're looking for very large outsized returns. And I feel, and maybe there's a question for Eric, I feel as though ad tech has had an enormous number of successful exits, just an extraordinary number of successful exits, but only a handful that have been over $1 billion, and a pretty small handful at that. I guess you're an early stage investor, Eric, so maybe it matters a little bit less. But if you're an A or a B round investor, how do you think about those sort of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's by design. That's why our funds are early stage funds, because a 9-figure or 10-figure exit to an early stage fund can lead to incredible performance. But if you are a sort of like multi-billion-dollar fund having a $1 billion exit, doesn't even move the needle. And I think that's also one of the things about venture that's hard for entrepreneurs to wrap their heads around. It's like, wait, if I have a $1 billion outcome, it actually doesn't matter for you. So yeah, I think as you get later stage, the aperture sort of opens up to, I think, less classic Series A and B firms, and more some of these like private equity firms that are starting to converge with VC that look for SaaS businesses in the $5, $10, $20 million range, because they can have a lower return multiple, because just their model is different. They go for 3 to 5x in 3 to 5 years. So similarly, a 9 to 10 figure, sort of like low 10 figure exit for them can be like awesome.
Also, the check size has gone up, right? Over the past, we raised the A in 2020?
Yeah.
And the B, we're in the middle of it right now. And I think that now you've got a lot of people who say no, it's you're not raising enough. I need to, we've got minimum 20 million, 30 million, 40 million checks.
Because they've raised larger funds.
Because they've raised larger funds. And so and they're looking for those kind of outsized returns, especially the more west you go, the more it is the case, right? They're only going after the 10 or the 11 figure exits, which, maybe they'll get it with the 15-minute delivery things, but it's difficult to see that happening in ad tech. It's true, because, we don't have a lot of those examples.
James, did you get that? Did you get a lot of how big could this get conversations?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. And I think it hurts us. I think you tweeted this morning, right, that it's like we have the trade desk, and then you look at Magnite, and it's tiny compared to the trade desk. So it's like, if you want to point investors to say this is how big ad tech can be, you better convince them that you can be the trade desk, because there's really no other examples, right? Yeah,
you look at a very successful company. One of my favorite examples is Innovid, which is a clear leader in the space, roughly $140, $150 million in revenue, and they're trading at 1x revenue on the public markets. And that would really give me pause as an investor to go into something in the measurement space potentially.
But then you have Double Verify, and irrespective of where they are today, I had dinner with the original seed investor in Double Verify, who wrote it through the 2 PE rounds and then IPO, and it was a 99x return for them.
Right.
99x.
Yeah, they do it. They exist, but I think it's much harder to look at that and say it's highly possible compared to a lot of the other like SaaS or any of these other kind of companies where they're just kind of churning out multi-billion-dollar public companies that there's ones we don't even know the names of that are out there. They're like $1 billion public company for mechanics or something, right? These exist.
Right. I'll give another anecdote of my beeswax days. So this is early stage, I think maybe A round. Had a really good meeting with the West Coast VC. We were pretty much done with the meeting. I was getting positive vibes, like we want to dig in. And then he did a Columbo, as we're leaving. He's like, one more thing. If someone came to you and offered you, say $150 million for this business, would you consider it? And I, being a rational human being, said, yeah, sure, I'd consider it. And he's like, well, we're out. Sorry.
Wrong answer. You have to
Wrong answer, bro.
say that I am going to run this. This is my life's work.
I have a brain tumor that makes me immune to real offers. I only want to go to Mars and build robots to serve the ads. Anyway, sorry. So that gives you an example of kind of the VC think a bit. So we talked about the trade desk. That kind of leads into the question of valuation. So valuation is sort of an art, especially in private companies, and multiples are the easiest thing to use, of course. But you have one giant outlier with a crazy valuation, and then you have a lot of companies with sort of not so exciting multiple valuations. So anyone want to chime in on this?
I mean, one thing I'll say is that when you look at the outcomes, it does rationally mean that ad tech valuations are going to be lower. And so like I've talked to like early stage founders who, read about the companies raising at 100x ARR for like their SaaS company. And you said to be like, look, you're not going to get that in ad tech, right? Like you're not, because like people aren't factoring in a $40 billion exit. They're factoring in a $1 billion exit or a $200 million exit. And so like you are going to see, compression as compared to that like fast growing SaaS company in the design space or something like that.
No one's getting 100x anymore. That was like a zero interest rate phenomenon.
AI companies are. One just got 300.
But I was going to say, like we had a bit of a moment in time, right? In 2021, 2022, where things were crazy and you had like 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 maybe X your revenue kind of multiples. I think it's back to reasonables, I would say, like 5 to 15 or something like this, 10, 20. But there's two things that are really important. One is your growth rate, right? If you grow at 100% or more, like you're certainly going to get a massive premium. The second one is, and I think maybe back to the trade desk example, is how much of the monopoly, I'm not saying monopoly, but like how much of a network effect can you build and how much dominant can you be in your vertical? Because that's attracting a lot of value back to you. And VCs like to bet on the winners, right? And so the more they know that you're going to be the winner because you're the head of the pack and everybody's consolidating around you. I think there's a lot of that network effect dynamic in our space in particular that is driving also a higher multiples.
Yeah, you look at companies like LiveRamp that it's pretty hard to switch off of that if you're using it for onboarding, or Double Verify. They have a competitor, IS Double Verify, obviously heated competitors, but as an agency, you have to use one of them, right? You're not going to choose not to use them, and those are the kind of effects that investors want to look at.
And I'll say the other thing that can lead to lower multiples in ad tech, right, is just competition. Like if you're raising money, the number one way to get a higher multiple is to have multiple term sheets and competition from your round. But if there's less A round or B round firms writing term sheets for ad tech companies, that will also push multiples lower. Which is why for investors like Eric, it's a great business to be in if you know what you're doing. So like you get more reasonable, there's less competition, and you can kind of bring value. So to all the investors out there, you're missing out on good opportunities.
I spend a lot of time using that exact verbiage. Well said. And at the end of the day, we know there's going to be 9 and 10 figure outcomes. There always is, right? So it's it's pretty clear it's a real opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's heating up a bit. Scibids with sort of a roughly 10x multiple on revenue, and MadHive with their crazy round, also around 10x revenue-ish. So it seems like things are percolating. It's also, I think, important to note that you could, with companies in earlier stages, you're still talking about revenue multiples. One of the problems is that given the interest rate environment, public companies are being evaluated on EBITDA multiples, which often lag until they get to a certain growth rate, whereas startups are rarely, if ever, on EBITDA multiples. So what advice? Let's go around the horn. Like, let's say I'm a CEO listening to this podcast. My business is doing pretty well. I already have a seed round and I have some revenue. What should I do if I'm looking at an A round? Maybe start with Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, number one, listen to this episode because these are two of the top founders in the space, and they were dropping a lot of gems throughout. I think it's, summarizing what I heard from them and what our selection criteria is. You need to be able to clearly articulate the opportunity because there are outsized opportunities in this space and you better well be building for them. That's number one. Number two, you need to, especially in this environment, have excellent metrics specific to revenue, specific to NRR, specific to growth rates. And then number three, be able to paint a picture of how this becomes a really big business. and see if your prospective investor is on the board of one of your customers. I think that's one of the. I actually never heard that from James, and it's like a no-brainer. And like, gosh, that'll get you in the door quickly.
Matthew, you want to give your advice?
Yeah, sure. I say select who you're talking to very, very carefully. You're going to lose, like, it's a huge time suck, right? I think for me over the past 10 months that we've been kind of, talking to investors, we closed the first tranche, we're still talking to them, getting to the second tranche. It might have been like maybe 30% of my time. So you want to make sure you get to the no as quickly as you can and move on. And so for that, target the ones that you think or are going to understand because they've invested in this space before, because they're ad tech, right? There's a lot of funds that have been funded or that are led by former ad tech execs that they'll understand much better what you're doing. And I think if you want to look for the right ones, look for the traditional financial VC type, but look also at strategics. There's a lot of interest from strategic investors now that the markets are coming back up a bit, and that there's a lot of cash to be invested, a lot of non-organic growth plans that are being built. There's a lot of strategic investment that is an opportunity for startups in our space to get backings, and it's smart money. It's backing, it's financial capital, but it's also a client. It's also kind of industrial support. So look at the one that makes sense for your business, but look broadly. And make sure you're not missing out on some of the most interesting ones.
And James, what do you have to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're running a seed company and you're now looking to raise an A, you need to build a time machine and go back 6 months and start building the relationships with the people that could lead your A, because I think that's the biggest thing is that you want to have you want to have people you've been talking to, building the relationships while you're not in the middle of a process, so that when you get to a process, you have those first group of people that know you, have seen your traction, understand your company. I think that's hugely important. Like the people that led our A round, I met them years ago, right, and talked to them for a long time. And so I think that's really important. But then I'd also echo what Mathieu said, which is making sure that you're selecting the right people. Like I've talked to seed rounds that they're obsessed with, we're going to go get Andreessen to lead our A. And it's it's not going to happen, right? I don't think they've done very many ad tech deals at all. Your numbers aren't where they would need to be. You're based in North Carolina, all these things that are not going to happen. So really trying to find the right investors, and hopefully your seed investors can also help you with that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that wasting time on the Andreessen Sequoias of the world when there's just zero chance.
So I try to do what you said, James. I cultivated maybe half a dozen, maybe 10 relationships with investors that would really have been great lead for our B round. Maybe started talking to them right after we closed the A, right? They reached out and say, hey, that's interesting. Let's keep in touch. And we're okay, makes sense. They're a portfolio company in our space. Talk to them every quarter, kind of updated them, growth, progress, et cetera, et cetera. And it was late 2021, early 2022. They were coming back to me, yeah, absolutely. You hit 5 million ARR, you're golden. That's great for B round, right? And then 6 months later, 7 or 8, you're great. Yeah. And then 10 to 12, we're definitely there. And so it's come on, guys, they keep moving the goalpost. And so the education piece, I think it was useful, but in the end, the market changes so quickly that the relationship you build 12 to 18 months before you're actually going to raise, and the expectation that you set and the numbers you have in mind, that all changed so quickly that it's difficult to, and in the end, none of them got involved in our round as a matter of fact, right? So all of that time was lost.
There's no worse signal than the enthusiasm of a VC on a first meeting. It has no correlation whatsoever to whether they're going to invest 100%. Or not. They're trained to be enthusiastic. That's their job, is to make relationships with entrepreneurs and be enthusiastic and tell them they're doing great. And then the real meeting where you actually present your case is what they really think.
I remember one of the meetings we had, it was one of the worst in-person pitches we ever had. And we were just grilled mercilessly. And on the way out, the guy's you'll have a term sheet on Monday. I'm what is going on?
All right, man. Things are weird.
That's what makes the process really difficult, right? Because you have to manage your own emotions. You get out of a first meeting or a second meeting and you're super pumped and you're my God, this is my new investor. There's a great connection here. And then the next thing you know, they don't return your emails anymore. And you do that 150 times over the course of 6 months. it's exhausting.
Or they
and
suggest
that's what
some really weird pivot to you. They're like, it's great what you're doing, but maybe you should be doing, a food delivery, 15-minute food delivery. Have you ever thought about that?
If we had more time, I would tell you about an investor who tried to get us into malware detection because of our publisher footprint. I mean, I didn't even know how to start to respond to the stupid ideas he put forward as the real direction that Adify should take. So, like, you know what? I'm out. That's over. Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about the news of the week.
Hey, this is Tom Webster from Sounds Profitable. As a fellow friend of Marketecture, I hope you've been able to enjoy some of the great content and interviews that my partner Brian Barletta has been producing here about ad tech and the audio space. Brian and I are 100% focused on growing podcasting and digital audio through research, advisory services, and our own unmissable private events, which are all made possible with the support of our 140 partners, from publishers to ad tech providers. But you don't need to be a Sounds Profitable partner to stay plugged into the future of audio. We publish 2 weekly newsletters and a daily news brief called The Download that promise to keep you educated, informed, and even entertained about the world of podcasting. And of course, it's all available as a podcast. All of our content is ad-free thanks to partner support, and we won't use your emails for anything other than sending you the news. So I hope you'll join us as we set a course for the future of audio at soundsprofitable.com.
All right, we're back. So, interesting news. I'm going to start with my favorite piece of news because I used to work there. So, right after we recorded last week, Freewheel put out a press release that they have done an integration deal with Magnite. This is following Freewheel's announcement a couple weeks back that they did a deal with Roku. And I think this is a big news, and I kind of want to, instead of just throwing to the crowd, I'm going to explain it. So here's why I think it's big news. So Freewheel is the leading ad server among broadcasters and complex video businesses, and one of the problems these companies have and advertisers have is that the distribution of high quality video is somewhat fragmented. So it exists on the websites of these publishers, but also on YouTube, on Roku. It exists on OTT properties like Samsung, Vizio, etc. And getting all those ads to work together is really hard because in many cases, those distribution partners have their own ad sales rights, similar to the way linear TV evolved in the US. And so as a result, the net result of this is that broadcasters often make less money than they should because ads aren't serving right because of competitive blocks or technical problems or things like that. And secondly, advertisers have problems controlling frequency and controlling where their ads appear. I think we've all experienced this. So my take on this is that Freewheel is kind of knocking out one at a time a lot of really important distribution places. With Roku, it's obvious. With Magnite, I think this is part of the SpringServe relationship where SpringServe has quite a few video ad serving contracts with OTTs. And by bringing all this together into a single auction, you can do the logic to provide the best experience for the advertisers and the publishers. So I'm pretty psyched about this, even though it's really in the weeds kind of news. And that's why I just monologued for 5 minutes about it. James, I kind of would ask you a question since you're an ad serving expert. What is your thoughts on video ad serving, how complex it is, and whether you have to do all these kind of deals or is it just a tech problem?
No, I mean, there's definitely a big part of the human problem here, right? Like you said, the exclusivity, the blocks, all the stuff that goes into these really legacy relationships. But I just think it's a really novel idea that, a ad server could have one unified auction. I wonder if we could get that other places, right? Instead of all the things that we hop around to make that happen in other spaces. I think that's just it's a step in the right direction, and it's good that Freewheel kind of made that leap.
Well, Google does a unified auction as long as you participate on their terms and give them all the data.
Right. Yeah.
I was going to say it was great if we had that for all publishers on display as well, and we didn't have an ad server that's also very partial to the result of the auction.
All right, where is this coming from? This is Roku, boom, Magnite, boom. Freewheel is being super aggressive now. Do you have any insight into literally where is this coming from?
I think there was a lot of turnover in terms of the management team there, and I think they're taking a fresh point of view. I think that there were, they acquired Beeswax. They had a lot of product development around I would say, more of a marketplace approach where programmatic guaranteed and other inventory would be available to buyers through Freewheel. And I think that was difficult because the players in broadcast are so strong and don't want to necessarily participate in a single marketplace. So this is more of a federated approach. And I think it's great. There was also a deal about 2 years ago that got virtually no press where Freewheel got interoperability with YouTube for ad serving. And they're the only ones in the video world, I believe, that has that. So I'm pretty bullish. Good job to the Freewheel team. So let's see what else. So Twitter X has partnered with Integral Ad Science on pre-bid targeting. So we've seen a number of deals over the years with walled gardens integrating with either Mode, IAS, or Double Verify as a way of verifying the quality of the inventory. I think this is interesting for two reasons. One, because it's probably, Linda's influence here. I doubt that Mr. Musk has any idea who Integral Ad Science is. And secondly, it's pre-bid, which is kind of interesting. I'm sort of like scratching my head about what that means exactly. Anyone want to take this one? Maybe Matthew?
Yeah, sure. I agree with you that it's another sign towards making X, Twitter. Are we calling it Twitter or calling it X?
Whatever.
It's X.
It's X. Making it kind of acceptable for advertisers. I think you've said numerous times that the revenue was still down massively from the what about this time last year, right? When the deal started.
Reports say 60% down.
Yeah, 60% down. So they need the money back, and I think one thing that advertisers hate is to be in the wrong context, in the wrong place, and there's a lot of wrong places on social media. So they should have started here. If you take it back, like there's less brand contextual problems, brand safety issues on traditional publishers than there is on social media. So that's where the IS and DV should have worked first and foremost. So I think it's a good thing for brands. I think it's a good thing for advertisers. Whether it's going to be enough for them to put money back on X, I don't know, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, because Twitter's or X has always had massive amounts of brand unsafe inventory, right? So you assume that they built internal systems. They probably just laid off all the engineers that wrote them and they stopped working, right? And so I imagine though, the real problem is not the concern of the brand isn't our Netflix ad might show up next to unsafe content. That was always a risk on Twitter that Twitter had somehow gotten past. The brand issue they're dealing with is a brand issue at the top. And you can pay IAS all you want, and it's not going to fix the brand issue at the top that's causing the problem, right?
Well, no, they again, I don't know if this is anecdote or, just things being surfaced. But there seems to be a lot more incidences of, just unsafe content around Twitter, since the change in ownership. James, you were on a podcast, the Get Market folks a couple of weeks ago, focused completely on what would you do with Twitter? And it was mostly around ad product, which I agree. Ari and I have been talking about this for a year now. There's two things that they need to do to win advertisers back. It's number one, improve the ad product. And number two, do something to at least have some assurances around brand safety. And this is squarely in the latter. So I think it's really good. I think it's important.
But I don't think it's actual brand safety. Because maybe there's an increase in politically intolerant speech, right? But there was always a lot of very unsavory pornography and stuff like this on Twitter.
Oh, there's
it was
NSFW.
Right? Yeah, that stuff has always been on there. And so I think the real issue is they lost all the brand advertisers, and those brand advertisers were just saying, we don't want the story out there that here's what Elon posted and here's Netflix advertising on Twitter. Right. And you can't fix that. Right. And that's I think that's the core of the issue they have from the branding part, which is why I think on our episode, that episode, it was a lot about, how do you get performance and small businesses and the those kind of advertisers who aren't tied up in that, we can't be seen advertising here.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. And I'm just sort of skeptical about how this would work technically, given that Twitter is an algorithmic feed. How does IAS going to, in real time, block something? We have Lisa Elschmeider coming on the show in a couple weeks, so we can ask her. I think there's also just a general skepticism around how IAS and DV do these deals with the partners, the walled garden partners, where they don't have full real-time access, as was brought up pretty extensively in the current YouTube scandal or controversy around them serving out-of-band video ads. So the other Google antitrust case moved forward. So for those listeners are familiar with, there are two major Google antitrust cases. There's actually like six, but most people are thinking about the DOJ's case against the ad tech stack. But there's another case where the DOJ has been suing about their use of default search placements. And that antitrust trial is moving forward with a September date. And the judge threw out the allegations regarding the pre-baked search results, which effectively is the Yelp case. So there were two parts of this case. One part was that Google search results that had aggregated search information from third parties like Yelp was thrown out. And the second part was the default search engine part, which is continuing to move forward. And this case could be quite substantial if Google is prevented from buying those search deals. Anyone want to take this one?
I mean, it's a utility, right? They're the pipes. If you think about what people use to access content and services online, it's telco, but it's also operating system, it's also browser, and it's also search engine, right? All of that is part of the utility. It's part of the pipe that deliver the content to the people. And utilities have to be regulated, right? And they have to be neutral. You can't decide what's going to be distributed. You have to have some form of neutrality, right? That's the spirit of the. I'm going to play the European socialist here, but that's the spirit of the Digital Markets Act in Europe that defines the notion of platform, right? The notion of gatekeepers, which are things that have a utility function, and that must abide by higher kind of competitive standards because they're just too important for society.
This brings up an incredible question, which is how did we get a French person on a podcast in August?
I was going to say, like, I'm happy to play the role as the free market American here because, like, it's just not a utility, though, right? Like, it's not in the sense that there's, usually utilities, especially in the U.S., right? Like, they're regulated because they are the only option. Like, I have one choice for power to run to my house, and so the pricing is set by the state. Everything is pretty regulated. There are clearly other options than Google, right? Like, I mean, DuckDuckGo, Bing. Like, there is a replacement. There is a replacement that is one click away for anybody. So I just don't think it rises to the level of utility. I think they are abusing their monopoly power in other ways, right? Like, I do think there are issues with some of the things they do, but I also don't think that like a search engine should be regulated as a utility.
Well, this sort of reminds me a lot of the Microsoft IE case from the 90s, where they made the same argument about the browser as part of the operating system. And the argument against it was that the default matters enormously. So you can switch to Firefox, but the default is IE. And I think that's the case here, which is if you use a different browser like Safari, the default is still Google in the search bar, and 99% of people won't change it or don't know how to change it. And they can buy that because of their monopoly.
Well, but that's a great thing to regulate, right? Like, I think if you were I think it's one thing to regulate how the search engine is operating. And I think that, like, I would be very against that. But the idea that Google is not allowed to pay, other firms to get preferential treatment, or not allowed to abuse their monopoly powers in other ways, right? Like intentionally suppressing, someone to favor themselves. Like, sure, maybe you can make arguments there.
Right. I think the remedy in Europe for Microsoft was at some point when you first opened your operating system, they had to show a dialogue giving all the different potential browsers that were available, and they had to be randomized. They weren't preferring themselves and all that sort of stuff. So you can imagine that working in search as well.
And in browsers, right? When you launch your operating system, right? You're on Android, you want Chrome, or you want Safari, you want Firefox, you want Opera, you want whatever. It's the same logic, right? And even app stores. And you see that I think it's in Holland that in the Netherlands, there's a case that has been pushing Apple to offer a different app store on iOS devices because it's the same thing. It's distributing the content, right? And so if you control content distribution, you can decide which content gets distributed and which doesn't. And so you need to have some form of competition at that distribution point.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree there. I think we should also, I don't know if it's just the pick on Google segment, because there's another thing, I don't know if you saw that came out about how DV360, it's set up so that DV360 and the Google network never bid against each other.
Interesting. I did not see that, but that sounds pretty consistent.
There's
so
a pattern of behavior here, right?
And so basically there's essentially, it's like they kind of claim it's to help protect people using both, but having written auction logic before, it's very easy to exclude an advertiser from bidding against themselves, even if it's coming from multiple sources.
Yeah. Well, that would have had a huge effect during this second price era, but in the first price era, it probably doesn't even matter that much.
Possibly true.
All right, last news of the week. So Cadent was acquired by a PE firm for $600 million. They say they were also going to acquire a lot more companies. NovaCap was the acquirer. They were previously owned by a PE firm, so this. I always don't know how to take these PE swaps, but I assume it's good news. It seems like the people involved were pretty excited about it. For those who don't know, Cadent's kind of a strange company. So Cadent is involved in various aspects of the TV business, more of the traditional TV business. So they, and I may be wrong about all this, so correct me if I am. They operate a network, an ad network in the TV space of remnant TV inventory. I think they're the leader in addressable TV. So addressable TV is where different 30-second spots are being shown to different households on the linear pipes, and they have been doing that for a while. And then they also serve ads into cable VOD systems, which is really sort of a backwater of the cable business, where if you go to the cable VOD showcase, there are ads there. And they do some CTV, but I think they're primarily on that side of the equation, which is great. I think that they have a new owner because there needs to be a lot more innovation in those areas. Eric, how do you think about this in terms of traditional TV versus CTV? Should we care about this?
Yeah, I mean, traditional TV is still a $70-something billion market here in the U.S. that's in desperate need of innovation and technology. So yeah, for sure. And yeah, for sure, it's all converging. PE to PE, when it's a company that's in a growing space that presumably has really good metrics, and reportedly it was a $600 million valuation. This could just be a case of fund dynamics where PE firm number one got their 3 to 5x in 3 to 5 years. PE firm 2 thinks that there's a 3 to 5x and 3 to 5 year opportunity for them. Again, if that's their fund model. And if you look at some of the bigger deals from this year, it's been in this advanced TV space, right? MadHive was again 300 million at a billion or something like that. So it seems like for the later stage stuff, TV is where it's at.
Yeah, and Dave Morgan last week on our show, I think he said 65% of the dollars are still linear.
Exactly.
Which is a crazy number.
Another reason that these kind of PE swaps happen, right, is that the old PE firm may have basically made the investment they're going to make in this company, because it sounds like they want to go and do acquisitions. They want to be more aggressive. So, moving to another PE firm, they might have a lot of fresh capital they're ready to put in to do those bolt-on acquisitions, to see how maybe they can make a move in CTV, things like that, to kind of, go to the next stage.
Yeah, CTV would be the obvious target, I would think, because my understanding is they don't play a big part in that space right now, but they have a lot of volume, a lot of salespeople, a lot of transactions going through them. So that seems like kind of an obvious area to invest.
They've got a lot of addressability capability. They can really kind of pinpoint households, right? It's all the cable. It was called cable something before, right? It renamed a few years ago to Cadent,
cross media.
Yeah, so it's kind of all of the local cable operators kind of aggregated at national level, so that you can do national campaigns across kind of a number of local cable. So it's all addressable. They've got a lot of like household addressability features, data on those households. It could be a very powerful business if it really kind of jumped to light speed in terms of like the digital transactions they embrace it.
And it's very easy to get confused, I think, with Ampersand, which used to be called NCC, which is a very dissimilar but related business. These cable hybrid companies can be pretty confusing. Maybe we'll have someone on the show who could explain all this to us one day. All right, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. So this was an awesome conversation. Hopefully we gave some entrepreneurs some insight that will help them with their next raise. And I'm sure myself and all the guests would be happy to talk to any entrepreneurs who are interested in hearing more or getting advice. So thank you so much. So James, Mathieu, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome, guys. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.